Nothing could have prepared me for the moment a frightened child quietly begged me to stop trusting the man I believed was protecting her. Because those few, trembling words shattered years of faith that I had built after losing the person I loved most. I walked away pretending everything was normal, but deep inside I felt a heavy fear growing stronger with every heartbeat as I realized the greatest mistake of my life might have been hiding behind the kindness of someone I had welcomed into my family. My name is Daniel Brooks, and nearly 8 years before that unforgettable afternoon I buried my only daughter, Emily, after a sudden medical emergency stole her from us long before anyone was ready to say goodbye. She left behind her husband, Mason, and their little daughter Ava, and, while I could never erase the pain of losing Emily, I promised myself that her little girl would never grow up wondering whether her grandfather had forgotten the promise he made beside a hospital bed. Every year I quietly transferred a large amount of money to Mason because I believed giving him financial support was the best way to provide Ava with a safe home, a quality education, and every opportunity Emily had dreamed about for her child. Whenever I visited, Mason greeted me with warm smiles, spoke proudly about raising Ava alone, and always insisted that everything was under control, leaving me with no reason to question whether my help was truly reaching the little girl who meant everything to me. Ava grew into a thoughtful and gentle 12-year-old whose quiet personality reminded me so much of her mother that every visit filled me with both happiness and heartbreaking memories. Yet I slowly noticed something unusual that I could never fully explain. She rarely asked for anything, wore the same faded clothes for months, and always smiled politely whenever I offered to buy her something new, as though she had already learned that wanting too much would only create problems inside her own home. Just before I was ready to leave after one ordinary family dinner, Ava gently held my arm and carefully looked around to make sure her father was nowhere nearby before speaking in a voice so soft I almost could not hear her. She begged me to stop sending money to Mason and quietly asked me to watch where he really went during the day instead of believing every story he told. And the fear I saw in her eyes convinced me that this was not the imagination of a child but the desperate warning of someone carrying a painful secret for far too long. For the next 2 days, I could not focus on anything because Ava's worried expression stayed in my mind every waking moment, and every memory of her honest nature reminded me that she had never been the kind of child to invent frightening stories. Instead of confronting Mason and risking the chance that he would hide whatever was happening, I decided to remain patient, pretending everything was perfectly normal while quietly preparing to uncover the truth on my own. Later that evening, I called Mason just as I had done countless times before, speaking casually as I mentioned that I was thinking about visiting them over the weekend because I missed spending time with Ava. His cheerful voice suddenly became hesitant before he quickly explained that the weekend would be too busy because of work responsibilities and several family plans. And although his excuse sounded believable, something about the nervous pause before his answer made my instincts tell me that he was hiding far more than simple scheduling conflicts. Before sunrise 2 mornings later, I parked my car far enough away from their neighborhood to avoid being noticed while patiently waiting for Mason to begin what I assumed would be another ordinary workday. He eventually walked outside, wearing expensive business clothes, hugged Ava goodbye with a practiced smile, climbed into his luxury vehicle, and drove away, completely unaware that I was carefully following several cars behind without attracting his attention. At first, everything appeared completely ordinary as Mason stopped for coffee before driving toward the city's financial district, making me wonder if I had allowed fear and suspicion to cloud my judgment after listening to an anxious child. My confidence disappeared the moment he ignored every office building along the route and instead turned toward an exclusive lakeside resort where wealthy members spent their days enjoying private entertainment that ordinary families could never afford. I watched from a distance as Mason changed into designer sports clothing, laughed comfortably with several friends, and spent the entire afternoon enjoying expensive activities, elegant meals, and endless luxury that had nothing to do with earning a living for his daughter. While he celebrated a carefree lifestyle surrounded by wealth and comfort, I could not stop thinking about Ava's quiet face, and for the first time since Emily passed away, I felt the painful possibility that the promise I had worked so hard to keep had been betrayed in the cruelest way imaginable. That evening, I drove through a nearby neighborhood hoping to clear my thoughts before returning home, But fate placed one more heartbreaking scene in front of me that erased every remaining doubt from my mind. Outside a small discount grocery store, I noticed Ava walking beside an elderly neighbor while carefully comparing prices on basic food items, placing only the cheapest products into a small basket as though every dollar had to be stretched as far as possible. I remained inside my car because I did not want to embarrass her. Yet tears filled my eyes as I watched the little girl I had spent years trying to protect quietly give up things most children her age never even had to think about. At that very moment, the painful contrast became impossible to ignore because the man receiving my financial support was enjoying luxury without hesitation while his own daughter worried about whether simple groceries would fit within a limited budget. The drive home felt longer than any journey I had ever taken because every mile forced me to relive the choices I had made since Emily passed away, wondering how I had allowed trust to replace responsibility for so many years. I realized that sending money had been the easiest part of keeping my promise, but truly protecting my granddaughter required courage, difficult questions, and the willingness to face painful truths that I had avoided for far too long. That night, I opened an old wooden box filled with family photographs and letters, spending hours looking at smiling memories of Emily holding baby Ava while imagining the future she had dreamed about for her little girl. Those treasured moments reminded me that love was never measured by how much money someone could provide, because real love demanded action whenever someone vulnerable needed protection from the very people who were supposed to keep them safe. As the first light of morning filled my living room, I made a decision that changed everything because I knew guessing would never be enough to save Ava from whatever was happening behind closed doors. I gathered years of financial records, organized every transfer I had ever made, and arranged a meeting with the most respected legal advisor I had known for decades, determined to uncover the complete truth no matter how painful the answers might become. I arrived at the office of attorney Benjamin Cole carrying a thick folder filled with bank statements, transfer receipts, and handwritten notes that documented every payment I had made since Emily passed away, hoping the evidence would reveal what my heart had refused to accept for so many years. Benjamin listened carefully, without interrupting as I explained everything from Ava's quiet warning to the shocking afternoon I had spent watching Mason enjoy a life of luxury while his daughter struggled with ordinary necessities. After studying the documents for several minutes, Benjamin leaned back in his chair and calmly explained that suspicion alone would never be enough if we truly wanted to protect Ava and hold anyone accountable for misusing the money intended for her future. He recommended hiring an experienced financial investigator who could legally examine available records, trace spending patterns, and build a clear timeline that would expose exactly where every dollar had gone over the years. Following his advice, I immediately stopped all future payments and instructed my financial advisor to place every planned contribution into a secure educational trust that no one except Ava could benefit from. When she became older, for the first time since hearing her desperate warning, I felt that I was no longer acting out of guilt or anger because every decision I made from that moment forward was focused entirely on protecting the child who depended on me. Several days later, the investigator contacted Benjamin with the first troubling discoveries, explaining that a surprising amount of money appeared to have been spent on luxury purchases, entertainment, travel, and personal expenses that had absolutely nothing to do with raising a growing child. Although the investigation had only just begun, the evidence was already forming a painful picture that matched everything I had witnessed with my own eyes during the day I secretly followed Mason. That same evening, my telephone rang just after sunset, and the moment I heard Ava crying so hard she could barely breathe, every terrible possibility rushed through my mind at once. Between frightened breaths, she whispered that her father had become unusually nervous, was hurriedly packing several suitcases into the car and kept repeating that they might have to leave before morning, because staying any longer could create serious problems that he could no longer control. The moment the call ended, I grabbed my keys and rushed toward Ava House with a level of urgency I had not felt since the night we lost Emily, praying that I still had enough time to protect my granddaughter before her life changed forever. During the drive, I contacted Benjamin, who immediately advised me to notify local authorities about the situation because a frightened child, sudden plans to leave without warning, and an ongoing financial investigation created far too many serious concerns to ignore. By the time I reached the neighborhood, two police vehicles had already arrived, and several officers were calmly speaking with neighbors while another team approached the front door with careful professionalism to avoid frightening Ava any further. I remained a short distance away with my heart pounding inside my chest, silently hoping that everything could be resolved peacefully without placing the little girl through another painful memory she would carry for the rest of her life. A few tense minutes later, Mason stepped outside carrying several large suitcases and confidently claimed that he was simply taking his daughter on a surprise vacation because they both needed a break from everyday life. The officers politely continued asking routine questions about their travel plans, but his explanations quickly became inconsistent, and every new answer seemed to create even more uncertainty instead of clearing away their concerns. One officer gently knelt beside Ava and quietly asked whether she truly wanted to leave with her father that evening, giving her enough space to answer without pressure from anyone standing nearby. Without saying another word, she suddenly ran across the yard, wrapped both arms tightly around me, and buried her face against my shoulder while trembling with fear, making it painfully clear where she believed she would be safest. Over the following months, investigators completed a detailed financial review that uncovered years of reckless spending, hidden debts, luxury vacations, expensive memberships, and countless personal purchases that had been funded with money meant to secure Ava's future, leading the court to place her financial support into a protected trust under independent supervision while she came to live with me in a home finally filled with peace, laughter, and hope once again, as I watch her grow into the strong, compassionate young woman her mother always believed she could become. I am reminded every single day that real love is never measured by the gifts we give but by the courage we show when it matters most. So please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.